Everybody, Scout Crafty here again. Mish Mosh Monday. Boy, they come quick, don't they? Okay, so last week we had the Long Island Antique Tool Collecting Association meeting. It was a great time. The guys are great there. We have such a good time. Anyway, Dan Semmel, my mentor, he loaned me a book for you guys to see, and I have to tell you something. This book is amazing. It's well, let me show you what it is. Okay, now the book is called The Modern Hardware Store. Now, this book goes back to 1929, you could see here, and that's 90 years old. And I'll tell you something. When you look through this book, I put some bookmarks here to give you some examples of some of it is filled with illustrations and things like that. And what we'll do is, I'm going to go through here real quick. You can stop your video if you want to get a good look at, but you got to remember something. Back years ago, when this book was printed, a hardware store was more than just what it is now that just sold, tools, things like that. Hardware store was like a general store was in the country. They sold everything, toys and sporting goods and all kinds of things. And this book would show you how to set up your store if you were contemplating opening a hardware store, or what to look for and what to buy. And here is an example of some light bulbs, and you can see here, the different wattage and the price of the light bulbs and how they set them up. But it was a big difference from what they do today. So I'm going to go through some of these pictures, give you a better look at them with the camera, and then this way we'll talk about this is where you would go for your dishes and your any kind of pots and pans. More examples of home goods, and look at the prices on some of these. It really makes you think about how things have changed. Now look at the tool display, how they put them behind glass and behind cabinets, and there were multiples, and everything was there for your viewing pleasure. Again, another look at some of the tools. You see the screwdrivers and hammers and hatchets and just an array of all different. Imagine us in that place. Now, here's an example of the locksmith department of the hardware store, and you can see over here, you can see the locks, and over here the latches, and all the different areas of what they had just for their locksmithing. And up here we had all the stock. You can see the stock on top, and there's their little ladder to get up there to get whatever you needed. And the gentleman waiting there patiently to give you a hand or help if you needed it. And there were so many questions, and look at the choice you have. I mean, now we go in there, we're lucky if we get one or two. Here, everything has changed. The internet is great, buying online is great, but nothing could compare to when they really wanted your money and wanted to work for it. It was a actual store that they used to have. You could see on the bottom here, it says Stamford, Connecticut, that this store was out of. But if you look over here, you look if they have a boat in the middle of the aisle. Look at the old-fashioned outboard motor here, and just all and look back here, the cases. I mean, imagine strolling through this store today. Now here is something we could relate to. Here is the tool section for Sears and Roebuck Company, Sears and Roebuck, and you could see here. Look at the array of hammers and how nicely they're set up. And if you look over here, look at the planes. The planes all lined up here. I mean, for you guys to collect planes, can you imagine being over here now? And up here, the old saws, the old bow saws, and those are all takedown saws. And just if you look around, there's so many things. Look at the squares here all set up, and everything looks so neat. And again, here's all the cabinets where they would keep the stock. Now, a big thing years ago, which unfortunately the youth of today will never see, is window displays. And they used to have, I even remember window displays when I was a kid. But here is a youth display for camping and whatnot. And look at how they set up everything like it was a campsite. You had your tent, and boy, you walk past here as a youth, as a young person, and you would say, wow. And you could just imagine being there and setting up your camp. Now, who here over 50 doesn't remember going past a store when you were a kid and seeing something, roller skates here, or seeing some bicycle, and just saying, oh, and just dreaming about that. I found this one terrific. This window display is from a place called the Johnson Hardware Store in Boone, Iowa. And look at the firearms. All there was a piece of glass here. And then all the firearms are stacked up and laying down. I mean, and here's his shack where the old man is sitting. I mean, how great. Can you imagine look at the interesting tool display that Hammack and Schlemmer had? And this was all illuminated at night when you walk by. And look at the you know, the levels and everything down here. All these small tools that you would see. You could just sit here and they probably had a little a drool ledge here so that you didn't have to worry about slobbering up the window. Anyway, that's just the tip of the iceberg for this book, and it's just filled with illustrations and how-tos and drawings and things like that. And again, thank you so much, Dan, for sharing it with us. And let's get on to our next topic. Okay, next up, anybody who's ever been involved in scouts or military, anything like that, knows the value of a good piece of rope. And I'm a big rope addict. I mean, I can't tell you how many feet of rope that I have, and it's just ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated with it. I had a scout leader years ago that was taught me the importance of taking care of and maintaining your rope. And well, I had a little spill of gasoline on one of my ropes in the car when I was transporting some gas, and I have to clean it up. But let me show you what you can do. Here at my wood storage rack, and a lot of times if I'm at a flea market or something and I see an old piece of, you know, rope and it's all dirty and grimy and greasy and it's only a couple dollars, I'll pick it up. This was practically black, this piece of rope, and I washed it, you know, and same with that one over there. Old manila rope, and I tell you, they come out beautiful, and especially when you do it right. And with this one, I added a little bit of fabric softener, a little downy at the end, make it a little softer because it was kind of stiff. But yeah, some pulleys and things like that. But maintaining your rope and keeping them clean, very easy. Now, one of the hardest parts of cleaning a rope is having a container big enough to hold the rope. So here we have a small piece of rope, so I'm only using a small bucket, but I already put detergent in the bottom. I'm going to fill it with hot water and then submerge the rope into the hot water. Now, this rope isn't any expensive rope or anything, but it is a nice braid of a rope. It's good for you know, small tasks and things like that. It needs the ends to be whipped, but right now we're just going to throw it in a bucket of hot water, stir it around a little bit, and let it sit in there for an hour. Okay, here we have our rope freshly cleaned and dried. We put it, we hung it over a pipe next to the furnace, let it dry. And this, as you can see, it's what they call a braided rope. It's not a twist rope. And I like these type of ropes because they're very flexible. You know, you can bend, but they're very easy to handle. They're very strong. They hold up well to abrasion. You can see here, there's a little bit of sign of wear in here, but nothing that would make this rope unserviceable. I mean, this is still a nice hank of rope or so. But on the edges here, you could see there was some electrical tape put on here. Now, at the end of the rope, sometimes the rope will tend to fray. So usually you put something around the end of the rope to stop it from fraying. Traditionally, years ago, especially with twisted rope, we used to like to use a thin line like this and whip the end of the rope, which is basically something every scout has to learn when they first get into the troop. But you wrap a thin cord like that around the end, pull it taut, and that stops it from unraveling. Electrical tape tends to unravel sometimes, not the best thing. And then I was thinking, sometimes heat shrink tubing is used. Even at the factory, they'll put a piece of this on. I said, maybe some people out there don't know what heat shrink tubing is or how it's used, so let's see what that's all. Okay, in the late 50s, a chemical engineer by the name of Paul Cook, he came up with a company called Raychem, and what he was experimenting with was polymers, but his focus was, Raychem was dealing with radiation and chemistry and combining the two to make different things. And he came up, he was credited with inventing this heat shrink tubing. And what's so interesting about this is heat shrink tubing comes in many different shapes, sizes. It comes in many different colors. It comes clear. It's basically, it's a mixture of polymers that is bombarded with a kind of radiation, and it changes the molecular structure. How cool is that? Now, heat shrink tubing is most commonly used for protecting wires and insulating wires, things like that. But there are a multitude of uses for this particular item. And besides heat shrink coming in different colors and combinations and thicknesses, it also comes in a lot of different shrink ratios. Now, for example, with some lower shrinking heat shrinks, it might be a 2-to-1, which means if it's a 1-inch piece of tubing, it might shrink down to a 1/2-inch tube when it's done. Some of the other ones have a 6-to-1. So that means something that might be this size might shrink down to this when it's done. You know, that might be 6:1 or something. So it's very interesting, the aspect ratios, the textures, the thicknesses, and a lot of them come with adhesive. Like you might see little strips of adhesive like this one has, that's in here, that when you shrink this down, it'll actually, the heat will, it's almost like having a hot melt glue in there, and it will stay on whatever you're putting it on. Now, the interesting thing about heat shrink is when you see it, this here it's in its expanded form. See, heat shrink starts off with like something like this, and through that process, they expand it to maybe look like this. And when you get this, that's in its most expanded form. So when you heat it up, it goes back, because of memory, it goes back to its original form. And let me show you how that works. When I was a kid and we first found out about the heat shrink and we were using it, you know, you could use a lighter, you could use a butane torch, a propane torch, but to be honest with you, none of these are really correct. The proper way to heat shrink tubing is with a heat gun like this. An electric heat gun is the best way. It doesn't burn it, and it gives you even heating all the way around. It's a really good investment. Now these heat guns, they've dropped down in price. You can pick them up very cheap, and they're really good for so many things in the shop. Now to demonstrate how this works, I'm going to take a little piece of heat shrink and I'm going to put it over this piece of aluminum. And you can see about here, we don't have a lot to shrink down, but I'm going to show you how this shrinks down. When I'm doing this, I'm going to be rotating this so that it gets heated evenly around it. Now you can see when it's properly shrunk down, you can see there's no wrinkles. It's absolutely tight. You cannot pull this. You can't turn it. You can't pull it off. It is solid. Even there is no glue inside this one, but it is on there solid. And it's very good if you had some, like either rope or anything else that, of course, wiring, what it's used for, but so many other uses you can use this for. Now, the thinner the wall thickness, the quicker it will shrink down. And I'm going to show you here in real time. I'm going to cut a piece here, a small piece off the end, and we're going to put it on this piece of conduit. And I'm going to show you, like I said, in real time. The only thing I'll do is I'll drop the volume so you're not hearing that loud heat gun. But here you can see I put it over the edge. You can see how much it don't have to shrink down much at all, but I'll show you what happens. Okay, there you have it. It's fully shrunk down here. And the one thing you want to try and do is, as soon as you're finished, you don't want to avoid touching it, because this does hold the heat and it stays very hot, the polymers, for a little while. So give it a little while to cool off, and then you can see if it's on there as strong as you want. But you don't want to overheat the thinner wall heat shrink, because if you overheat it, it could actually split as you're shrinking it, because it wants to keep shrinking. So when it gets down to the area that you want, stop applying the heat, let it cool off, and then it'll be a solid, really nice covering. Now here we finished our rope, just a couple pieces of heat shrink over the tape that was there, and you could see what a nice job that does. That's you know, there's no moisture that'll get in there, and it's sealed up, and it's just a nice, neat finish. I want to give Dan a special thanks for the loan of the book, and thank all of you for watching. Have a nice day. I hope you enjoy this nice weather. Take care now. Bye-bye.